There is a moment in this story that almost ended everything. Not on a football pitch, not in a dressing room, in a hospital in Lisbon, where a 15-year-old boy was told that his heart was not beating the way a heart should beat, that the thing he had built his entire life around, the only thing that had ever made sense to him, might be taken away before it had even properly begun. The doctors explained it carefully: a racing heart, an irregular rhythm, a condition that if left untreated could be dangerous, possibly fatal, certainly incompatible with professional football. His mother was called. She traveled from a small island in the Atlantic where the streets were narrow and the houses were small, and the family had never had enough of anything. She sat in a waiting room in a city she did not know, in a hospital that smelled of antiseptic, and she waited to find out if her youngest son's life was about to change forever. The boy in the hospital bed was not afraid. That is what people who knew him then say, and it is the thing that is hardest to believe until you understand who he was and where he came from. He had already survived things that would have broken most people before he turned 16. A hospital room was just another room, another obstacle, another thing to get through. His name was Cristiano Ronaldo. And the story of how he got to that hospital bed and what happened after he left it is the story of the most decorated footballer in the history of the sport. The island of Madeira sits in the Atlantic Ocean, 600 miles off the coast of Portugal. It is beautiful in the way that places are beautiful when nobody has had enough money to ruin them. Volcanic cliffs, green mountains, narrow cobbled streets that wind down to the sea. Cristiano was born in 1985 in a neighborhood called Quinta do Falcão, in the city of Funchal. It was the poorest part of an island that was itself not wealthy. His family lived in a house so small that 4 children and 2 adults shared a single bedroom. His mother worked as a cook and a cleaner. His father, José Diniz, worked for the local council, maintaining the roads. He also drank, heavily, consistently, for most of his adult life. Cristiano grew up watching his father disappear, not at once, slowly, over years, into a dependency that would eventually kill him. But the boy did not disappear with him. He ran. He ran to the local football pitches in the neighborhood, and he stayed there until it was dark, and then he stayed a little longer. His mother, Maria Dolores, has said in interviews that as a child he would rather go without food than miss a chance to play, that she would open the front door at midnight and find him still outside with a ball. There was something different about him from the beginning. Not just the skill, which was obvious and undeniable from the time he was 8 years old, but the hunger behind it. A specific, burning quality that children from comfortable backgrounds rarely have. The hunger of someone who understands at a very young age that this is the only way out, that there is no other plan. By the time he was 12, Sporting CP, one of the biggest clubs in Portugal, had heard about a boy in Madeira who was unlike anything their scouts had seen at that age. They asked him to come to Lisbon for a trial. He passed. They offered him a place in their academy. He accepted. His mother packed one bag. She took him to the ferry and then the flight, and then she went home. And Cristiano Ronaldo arrived in Lisbon, a 12-year-old boy, alone, in a city he had never been to, with an accent so thick that his new teammates could barely understand him. The other boys called him Crybaby, not because he was weak, because the Madeiran accent sounds so different from Lisbon Portuguese that when he spoke, they laughed. And when they laughed, he cried, not from sadness, but from frustration, from the specific fury of someone who knows exactly what he wants to say and cannot make the words come out right. He called his mother every night. She has said that hearing his voice on the phone, thin and far away, was one of the hardest things she ever experienced. But she also says that even then, even at 12 years old, crying in a dormitory in Lisbon, he never once said he wanted to come home. He learned to speak like them. He learned to make them stop laughing, and then he made them watch. By 14, He was playing for 4 different age groups at Sporting simultaneously: the under-14s, the under-16s, the under-17s, and the under-18s. Coaches were rearranging schedules so he could appear in as many matches as possible. Players 2 and 3 years older than him could not keep up with him in training. There was a quiet understanding spreading through the academy, moving from coach to coach, that they were watching something rare. And then at 15, the racing heart. Tachycardia, the technical word for what was happening inside his chest. His heart was beating too fast, at irregular intervals, in a way that put strain on the muscle and created the risk of something far worse. The condition had probably been there for years, developing silently while he ran and trained and pushed himself harder than anyone around him. The surgery was performed at a hospital in Lisbon. Doctors used a laser to cauterize the tissue causing the irregular rhythm. It was a delicate procedure. It worked, and less than 2 weeks later, Cristiano Ronaldo was back on the training pitch. 2 weeks. From open-heart surgery to full training in 2 weeks. Sporting's medical staff were not sure whether to be impressed or alarmed. His coaches simply accepted it, because by then they had stopped being surprised by what he was capable of. The heart was fixed. The rest of him was, if anything, more driven than before. Because now he knew, in a way that most 15-year-olds never have to know, exactly how quickly everything could disappear. He trained like a man who had been told he had limited time. Because in a way he had been. In August 2003, Sporting CP played a pre-season friendly against Manchester United. Cristiano was 18 years old. He had recently broken into Sporting's first team, the youngest player in their history to do so at that point. Sir Alex Ferguson had been told to watch him. What happened on that afternoon in Lisbon became one of the most retold stories in football history. He destroyed Manchester United's defence, completely, systematically, repeatedly on both sides of the pitch. At half-time, United's players, experienced internationals, Champions League winners, men who had seen everything, were queuing up in the dressing room to ask Ferguson to sign him. They had never seen anything like it. Not at 18, not at any age, Ferguson signed him before the flight home. Number 7, David Beckham's old number, vacated that same summer. The number that carried the weight of an entire club's history and expectations, placed on the back of a teenager from a small island in the Atlantic, who had survived poverty, loneliness, and a heart that didn't beat correctly. He was ready for all of it. What followed at Manchester United was not an overnight explosion. It was something more impressive. A young man who knew exactly what he was and exactly what he was not yet, and worked with terrifying precision to close the gap between the two. Inconsistent in his first seasons, brilliant in flashes, always learning, watching how the best players moved and thought and made decisions under pressure. By 2007, he was the best player in the world. By 2008, he had won the Champions League, the Premier League, and the Ballon d'Or. He had become something the sport had not quite seen before. A player who combined the physical gifts of a natural athlete with a technical precision that seemed almost engineered. Faster than he should be. Stronger than he looked. More accurate than was reasonable. Real Madrid paid €80 million for him in 2009. A world record. He wore number 7 again, in white this time, in a stadium that held 80,000 people, in a city that treated its footballers like gods. And he responded by becoming, over the next 9 years, the most prolific scorer in the history of the club. 4 Champions League titles. 4 Ballon d'Or awards. Numbers so large they stopped feeling real. But there was a room his trophies could not fill. Portugal had never won a major international tournament. For all of Ronaldo's individual brilliance, the national team had always fallen short. Semi-finals, quarter-finals, group stage exits. Always something. Always a reason, always, somewhere in the conversation, a comparison. with a player from Argentina who had also achieved everything at club level and nothing with his country. In 2016, at the European Championship in France, Portugal reached the final. Ronaldo was injured in the first half. He spent 60 minutes on the sideline in his kit, unable to play, directing his teammates, pointing, shouting instructions, willing the result. Portugal won. He lifted the trophy with tears running down his face and an ice pack strapped to his knee. And for a moment, it looked like the story was heading toward the ending it deserved. But the World Cup remained. In 2022, in Qatar, Portugal began the tournament brilliantly. Then the manager, Fernando Santos, made a decision that stunned the football world. He dropped Ronaldo from the starting lineup. Portugal played without him and won. In the quarter-final against Morocco, Ronaldo came on as a substitute. He stood on the pitch at the end of a match Portugal had lost, and he cried. Not quietly, completely. In front of 80,000 people and a global television audience, the man who had never shown weakness in any room or on any pitch stood in the desert night and wept. He was 37 years old. He had given football everything, and it still hadn't given him the one thing he wanted most. What happened after Qatar is the part of the story most people haven't finished telling yet. Because Cristiano Ronaldo did not retire, did not fade, did not accept the end that the script seemed to have written for him. He went to Saudi Arabia. People laughed. People said it was a retirement tour dressed up as a career move. And then he kept scoring, kept training at 4 in the morning while his teammates slept, kept breaking his own international scoring records with Portugal, became the first man in football history to score in 5 World Cups. He is still playing, still running, still driven by something that started on the narrow streets of Madeira and was almost stopped by a heart that beat too fast in a hospital in Lisbon when he was 15 years old. The doctors told him his career might be over. He was back on the training pitch in 2 weeks. That is not a detail. That is the entire story. Because what makes Cristiano Ronaldo extraordinary is not the goals or the trophies or the records that keep being broken and then broken again. It is the specific quality that was visible at 12 years old in a dormitory in Lisbon, and at 15 in a hospital bed, and at 37 crying in a stadium in Qatar. The refusal, the absolute, unwavering, almost unreasonable refusal to accept that the answer is no. Tell us in the comments, what moment in Ronaldo's career do you think defined him most? And if this story hit you differently than you expected, you already know what to do.